So long story short, they can't figure it out, but they did notice my lower control arm was loose, and they said the knocking noise could be coming from that. They could not diagnose where the noise was coming from other than maybe the lower control arm. Didn't, so they replaced that. It didn't fix the problem. So in hindsight, did I need to change the lower control arm? And was the skid plate more of a safety hazard if that popped off while I'm driving down the road and then it's just sliding down the freeway because the bolts weren't secure? I don't know. So far as I can tell, I don't hear the popping anymore when I'm turning the wheels after taking the skid plate off. One of the videos I watched was a guy had a similar issue, and he found out that it was his the differential bracket, the front diff bracket that holds it to the frame, the front differential. And he said he noticed that his was loose after taking off his skid plate. So I don't know, maybe it's a skid plate issue with Toyota. All right, so there was a point in time where Americans and car culture, they were hand in hand. It was respectable. It was, I don't know, you take your vehicle to a shop, they gave you all the services and did their jobs accordingly. You pay for what you get, right? And then somewhere over the course of modern day society and greed, the work and the craftsmanship got crappier. People wanted to start doing things themselves, and yeah, it's like everybody just wants, I don't know, man. Sometimes I want to go off this planet. All right, so the last place I took this to was Toyota, and they have some of this responsibility right now. Now I have all the bolts. One here, one there, one there, one here. But I am missing spacers, and the skid plate was not secured properly after they were done with their services. Now they did mention to me that some of the bolts were stripped out, like the oil access panel is an Allen, so therefore they have to take the entire skid plate off to reach that oil filter. When I did take it in, I told them that there was a popping sound, and that, some of the bolts were in fact loose on my skid plate, and if I could get a quote to diagnose that and fix everything. Now, I don't know if the bolts are just worn over time or what, but they did give me a quote. They said that some of them would need to be retapped and probably new bolts in general, because the total of, the different shops you take them to, they end up stripping this stuff out over time. Anyway, I don't know how they could not diagnose that it was possibly the skid plate that was causing that popping when turning because of the torque on the differential brackets or mounts. I don't know. I will tell them. I will notify them though, and let them know. That way they know what to look out for. It's not necessarily their fault. I'm just surprised that, yeah. Also, like I said, it's not necessarily their specific fault. They're catching the brunt end of this because they were the last shop to try and diagnose this and then send me on my way without fixing the issue. And I think the issue was the skid plate, which was definitely probably more of a safety hazard, in my opinion. You know, if that thing pops off and goes skidding down the road somehow. You know, I didn't know how bad it was because I've been taking it to shops to get serviced, and you know, you just assume that they put it on and it's all good. It's not a problem, right? They're the professionals, but here we are. Ultimately, it's my vehicle, it's my responsibility. I need to address this and take care of this. So the skid plate will not be going back on until I get it fixed. We'll drive the truck around, see if that popping persists or if it's gone. If it's gone, then you know it's the skid plate. But I think it's a combination of the, like I said, the torque against the front differentials, which holds basically the steering rack. Well, it's all connected to the steering rack, the frame, the steering rack, the front differential, and then the CVs, right? So when you turn your wheels, the CV is connected to the axle, the wheel, and then also the steering rack, the tie rods are connected to the wheel. So that's where you're getting that tension, that torque, and it's flexing a little bit and causing the loose skid plate to pop. And it sounds like it's coming, you know, and that's just a speculation at this point. I don't know. We'll see if it fixes the problem. I did a visual inspection and I don't see anything that's obviously loose on the mounts, the diff mounts. And then, you know, the tie rods seem tight. They don't seem loose. The CVs seem, you know, there's always going to be a little bit of play in those because the way they're designed, but they're not obviously loose or leaking. Yeah, becoming a pro. It is not Toyota of Knoxville's fault, although I think they could have done better with diagnosing this issue. Ultimately, I think the issue was the wear and tear over the years. It's got like 200,000 miles on it. The skid plate's been dropped for oil changes like God knows how many times. You know, wear and tear, these bolts, they start to lose their integrity over time. So yeah, you know, my recommendation would be that they keep an eye out for this on the next one. You know, this could be a potential issue, and I would say that they should not put these skid plates back on knowing that these bolts are not fitted properly. I would tell the customer to put in the back of your truck until you can afford to pay for it. And I would not send people on their way with a half-ass bolt job driving down the road. Dirty hands, clean money. All right, so the video I watched where the guy said he had a similar issue was he took his skid plate off and he noticed that his differential mount, his front differential mounts right here, these things that mounts the front diff for the four-wheel drive, holds it in place, that it was loose and popping. But he took his skid plate off too, and then he tightened all that stuff up, and it got better. So basically I did the same thing, and I'm looking this visually inspecting, and I don't see any, like, I mean, a lot of times you won't be able to tell because these things, you know, under torque, they can pop, but they can still feel snug at rest. But I tried to recreate that when I took the skid plate off, and literally can't hear anything. And I think what happened was when you turn the wheels, you know, the CV joint here, and then the tie rod, when you're turning the wheels, it was causing enough torque or tension on here to get the loose skid plate to kind of pop, I guess. And that's not necessarily like, you know, it wouldn't normally do that, but there's always going to be some flex when you're applying that kind of torque to things. You know, my recommendation would be that they keep an eye out for this on the next one. You know, this could be a potential issue, and I would say that they should not put these skid plates back on knowing that these bolts are not fitted properly. I would tell the customer to put in the back of your truck until you can afford to pay for it, and I would not send people on their way with a half-ass bolt job driving down the road.